witnessed federal agents tackle a United States senator to the ground for asking a question. He was tackled and then shackled, essentially, on the ground, on his knees. And that is truly the hallmark of an authoritarian government. Full stop. Senator Alex Padilla, duly elected by millions of Californians, went to a press conference with a cabinet secretary of which he has oversight responsibilities for, asked a question, and then basically was pushed to the ground. And that, to me, is a sense that we are crossing the Rubicon. And this obviously comes on top of the fact that the president has deployed the National Guard over the objections of the governor of California to the streets of Los Angeles. And even on top of that, he has now deployed Marines who are soldiers for war on the streets of Los Angeles. So this is a crucial moment for all of us as a country. And that is why it is so crucial that we have leaders like Governor Walz. And I just want to acknowledge that in the months after the election, there were leaders who were stepping back, sitting down. And Governor Walz has stood up every minute to protect our democracy, to call out the authoritarian reach of this administration, and to articulate how, specifically how, they are hurting so many people. And that's why his leadership is so crucial. I am incredibly honored that he is here today in this moment to speak not just about his view of the country and how we move forward as a country, but also to acknowledge where we are and what leadership is called for today. He has been doing that by going around the country, not just talking to Democrats, but going to town halls in Republican districts, in red states, and speaking truth to power. That is how we build for the future. That is how we take this moment where democracy is in the breach and build a united front in the country. And I am incredibly, as I said, incredibly honored that he is here today to speak about where we are and his vision for the future. Governor Walz. Thank you. Thank you again for being here. I guess I would just ask you, how do you see where we are? What do you see about these? What do you think of these events of the last week?
Well, good to have you all here. Some of you are runners. You might know this feeling I'm in. You know, the day after a marathon, you both feel really great and you're about ready to die. Yesterday, I spent 8 hours in front of the House Oversight Committee, which needs to be a Netflix series, by the way. It is the most bizarre group of folks together in the interaction. But the irony of it was, and again, trying to find humor in moments of real tragedy is something. It was during that hearing, which was supposedly on sanctuary states. I was there with Governor Pritzker and Governor Hochul, and they were grilling us because we have committed, I guess, the incredible crime of treating people like human beings, and that was kind of our frame. And it was during that hearing that I heard about Senator Padilla. And so I've been saying it, and I am not prone to hyperbole. I am prone to like popping off a little bit, I know that. But, you know, pretty like, you know, I got to see the facts, I got to do all this. I believed all along we were marching towards authoritarianism, and people were telling me in December, you know, you're overreacting. And I said, the road to authoritarianism is littered with people telling you you're overreacting.
Absolutely.
And it has just been the steady state. I mean, this is so predictable. So I would say I think we're in a dangerous time. I think we're seeing it manifest itself. The institutions appear to somewhat be holding certainly not the Congress. They are not holding. The courts are holding better than I might have anticipated, to be honest with you, even being an optimist. And I think, as Neera said, whether they're elected officials at the national level or below that, but just regular folks starting to stand up and make the case. And so it's, I've said this, we will get through this. We have to get through this, but I think we're kidding ourselves whistling past the graveyard if we don't think this is going to get worse before it gets better. I hate to say that. And some of you heard me say that maybe before. I remain eternal optimist because I've come through the fire of supervising the high school lunchroom. And this one, though, I'm telling you, we have to buckle up a bit. But look, I'm seeing it across the country. People are buckling up. And leaders, seeing Governor Newsom stand up is really, I think, hopeful.
And you have experience in the National Guard, a unique set of experiences. And I guess I'd just ask you, what do you think of the National Guard being deployed and then Marines being deployed in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I don't have expertise in a lot of places. I said, this is one I actually do just by life experiences. I spent 24 years doing this. I, as an enlisted soldier, was deployed. National Guard has dual roles, their state role, and then they have the federal role. The governors are in charge of you when they put you into Title 32 status, and I have been mobilized for that, for flood duties, tornado cleanup, security issues, and then have been mobilized under Title 10 to do missions overseas, which is a normal process in this. But I also had an experience when I was in Congress. I served on the Armed Services Committee, and I was concerned during the first wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that the National Guard was being just called up and used, however, with very little coordination of the state. When you take a National Guard unit, that means they're not there for the things that you would use them for at home. So you need to think about it and coordinate it. And so as a member of Congress, I helped pass and create what was called the Council of Governors by law. And the Council of Governors was 10 governors appointed by the president, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, who worked with the Department of Defense, who worked with FEMA, who worked with the administration to coordinate how our National Guard interfaced and how emergency services interfaced. And then I had no idea when I did that in 2014 that I would later become a governor and be the co-chair of the thing that I created. And it was, I looked like a genius, but trust me, it was not. It was not Forrest Gump. And so I served in that, and I worked with it under, putting it in when President President Obama was there, was appointed, to it by President Trump the first time he was president. He had me be the co-chair, and then President Biden had me stay on as co-chair. And then President Trump fired me on January 21st this year. But the whole point of that is understanding how this works. And what you're seeing, while they go to historical reference points where LBJ used it in 65 or whatever, there's no analogy to how this is being used here. No request locally, no coordination locally, a federalization of the Guard. And the thing is about the Guard, they can be used in the civil inside the states without violating posse comitatus. But they are not a police force. They need to be accompanied with law enforcement. Law enforcement does law enforcement. National Guard does that. And some of them are helicopter pilots. Some of them are tankers. Some of them are supply sergeants. They do different jobs. So to expect this, you use them in emergencies, to expect them to be able to carry this out is a very dangerous situation for them and can be for the public if the coordination's not good. So I'll just have to tell you, just a gross overreach, and then we can get into it but the idea of federal troops on there, they didn't invoke the Insurrection Act, by the way. And I think I don't know why they didn't actually. And by the way, George Bush in Katrina used the Insurrection Act correctly in Katrina, pretends, it's probably debatable, I guess, but to try in New Orleans. And then there was a fear that he was creepingly going to just continue to use it. So there was a pushback in Congress, and myself and Tom Davis, the Republican congressman from Virginia, reinstituted that, and we put the Insurrection Act back in, and now we're back again. So it's a dangerous time. It's an inappropriate use. I saw the courts put a stay on it, and then the appeals courts overturned it. Just unprecedented, dangerous, according to local officials who know best, totally unnecessary other than a provocative move. So,
And what do you think people should do in this moment?
people in general?
Yeah, the public, all of us, leaders.
Yeah. Well, I think stay informed. I mean, I'm not telling you anything, it's not life coaching or whatever, but don't be doom scrolling through TikTok or whatever. That's not helpful at this point in time. Although all of mine are about dogs, so it is helpful in that regard. So the algorithm's working. I think it's continue to speak up, and the reason I am so concerned, the inability of the legislative branch, Article 1 of the Constitution, to take any of their authority and to capitulate is stunning to me. Why would you get elected if you didn't do that? You could maybe agree, and to see this gross overreach. What I think was important is seeing people speak up, and some of you have seen that study that said if 3.5% of the population speaks up, you'll see change or whatever. I could feel it out there when the past few months, I started going to these Republican districts after I saw the Republican leader tell them, don't go, don't do these town halls because you would have to defend cuts to Medicare, cuts to Social Security, and you're going to have these nasty clips that are going to be out there. That offended me on many levels. It offended me as a former member of Congress because I stood in those town halls in the summer of 2010 when the ACA was being debated and just got hammered. But I was proud to stand there because I was going to support the ACA and I voted for it. I think these town halls, going into these places, engaging people in non-traditional settings is the way to do it because, look, a lot of Democrats showed up for that. But a lot of independents showed up and some Republicans. And I did a town hall with Beto O'Rourke in Fort Bend, Texas, Deep Red, Texas or whatever. Huge crowd. And some of the people who showed up were anti-vaxxers. And one guy put out, his anti-vax stuff. I reminded him they had a measles outbreak. We had a little dialogue. But afterwards he said, well, I just wanted to talk to the congressman about this. I'm glad you came to do it. He didn't support me. He wasn't there for the same thing, but he was there to speak out. So I think there is this movement that the public discourse, the idea of free speech, the idea of petitioning your government, they're trying to basically criminalize that. Seeing a president say, if you come and protest this, there'll be bad things happen to you. So I'm encouraging people to do that, to speak out, to go into the lane you think you need to be in.
And you're speaking at a No Kings event tomorrow?
I am tomorrow in St. Paul. We know how to begin.
Might want to just say what a No Kings event is.
Yeah. You should, if you have nothing else to do for 8 hours, go watch that hearing yesterday. But somehow this got tied into billionaires in China funding this or whatever. I'm like, these are like people in St. Paul that just like to kind of do protests and stuff. And that's what they do. And they're feeling it and they organize it. So I think going and making that case, I think it is a good counter, because I'm just going to say it as someone who, proud of military service, understands the importance of it, but understands they serve us. And whenever I come out here, I take great joy in running my mall route and down around the monuments or whatever, and it was horrific down there today. I'm just going to tell you, it just looks wrong, feels wrong. And so I think I'm going to go be with a few thousand folks who kind of have the tradition that there is a separation there, that we don't need this. And this is not Pyongyang on a Saturday. So I'm just going to confess too, and might get me in trouble, whatever. I have never so hoped for rain in my life. So, there you go.
So, Governor, there's a lot of talk, I think, about, you just talked about Medicaid cuts and what's happening in reconciliation. And there's been a robust sort of debate amongst the center left about, focusing on democracy and at the expense of focusing on impact on real people of tariffs, Medicaid cuts, cuts to the Inflation Reduction Act. How do you see that debate? What's your take on what people on the broad center left should be doing in this moment?
Look, I'm an all the above people. Fill all the lanes. The one thing that Donald Trump can do is he sucks up so much oxygen. There's not a single person or event that can get that type of coverage. And I'm of the belief that we need people out there in all the lanes, whether they're doing new podcasts, whether they're doing large rallies like Bernie and AOC, whether they're doing town halls in Wheeling, West Virginia, things that we're all doing. And I'm just going to name this. I don't understand where the calculation, yes, the economy's horrible. And today, did you see that this was amazing? And I'm sure that the Trump supporters are once again going to show the wisdom and the vision that their president has, because he said, did you know there are immigrants here, undocumented, who've been working really hard on farms. And they're doing the work, and if they don't do that work, it's hurting our farms. So he's going to suspend that and maybe in the hospitality, space of this. But my take, yes, we should be talking about that. We should be talking that prices haven't come down. We should be talking about the situation in Ukraine was not over on day one, and now we have an expansion that is incredibly dangerous in the Middle East because nothing has been achieved there. But my take on this is how can we then say, well, we're focusing on this, and there's basic human rights issues, because I've been criticized for continuing to say we need to protect the trans community because they're coming for them. They're going, and it doesn't weaken the argument that the economy's bad. So and look, if that's my lane, then I think we should fill it. If there's another lane that is pushing back and giving an alternative, that should be filled. And it's one of the reasons why that I think every time they do a press conference, we need that press conference. And they try and make it all spooky. Those who know their history and things, the British with the shadow cabinet, the shadow government or whatever, we need to be making what the alternative is, which well, I think we may get to this. Mm-hmm. All of this is something, but that's all fine and dandy, but people voted for that. Now, how do we and what are we not doing why they didn't vote for us? And I would argue that the many weaknesses that Donald Trump has, the most glaring one is he is incompetent at governing, and we have to be competent at governing. We have to deliver policies that improve people's lives in the short run, not just the sugar highs of I'm going to deport, your neighbor or whatever it is. We have to show that, look, this improved quality of life. This made childcare more affordable. This made your school safer. This fixed the roads and bridges. And I'm a big believer that right now it's about competency and compassion being together. Everybody needs to fill these lanes with the message. And again, I don't think we choose between our core values, compassion, kindness, everybody being included, and highlighting that cutting Social Security is ridiculous, Medicaid's ridiculous, and here's the outcome.
Great. So I'll follow up on that with, as we think through the path forward, you just went through a budget experience and passed things that are solving problems. You touched on this, but just to drill down, as you see, we believe very strongly in opposing what the Trump administration is doing, but also building an alternative agenda to give people a choice between two visions of change. How do you see that, given your experience in Minnesota just this week? And how would you, if people ask you what we should do going forward, what's your answer?
Yeah, we passed a budget at 2 a.m. on Tuesday night. Our session ended May 19th, our regular session. We don't have full-time legislators. Our fiscal year budget starts July 1st, so we were moving towards shutdown. We were moving towards layoff notices, and you get into this. But here's the reason for that, and the reason that I'm optimistic and I think it's a better model. Minnesota is truly a purple state. Now, I am super proud that we are the only state since 1972 that have voted for a Democratic candidate for president, the only one, because where all the rest of you got it wrong, we voted for Mondale, and we voted for Mondale. So, but we're divided. Our legislature always hinges on one or two each way. As governor since 2019, I have had, in those 6 years, 4 of them split and 2 of them where we had the majority. And I will go to the split one where we compromise and get a budget done. This one, we have the most narrowly divided legislature in the country. The House is tied 67-67, and the Senate is 34-33 with a 1-vote DFL majority in there. which means it was 101 to 100. And I lovingly say this because I was a friend with Senator Manchin. Every one of them thought they were Joe Manchin. Everything was a veto. Everything was shut down. If I don't get a new dairy road in, dairy barn in this district, I'm shutting you down. And so it was super complicated, but here's what happened. We passed a balanced budget that left a surplus on. We looked over the horizon. Minnesota budgets in biennium budgets were constitutionally required to balance the current biennium the next 2 years, but we did the next 2 years after that, and then we looked out with some of the structural imbalances where there were cost drivers that were increasing too much. We were able to put some curbs on those. Democrats curbing government growth in a responsible manner, and to do so, Republicans voted for some tax increases, which I thought hell would freeze over. Now, there were some bad parts of it. We had to compromise because Minnesota's a state. We were top state for health care. Mayo Clinic, top state for getting people out there. We also provide and believe health care is a human right, so we provided it to undocumented people. And what ended up happening is the Republicans said, we will shut the government down and you will not get a single vote. And there is no way you can pass a budget. And they were unified. I fought with them for months and months and months and months. And at the end of the day, I said, we have got to leave children on and any new children coming. And we compromised that next year, undocumented adults will come off. Now, as all of you know, it's federal law. They'll just go to the emergency room. They'll get less care. It'll be more expensive. It will be, it's not the right way to go about it. But to get that done, we compromised to be able to get that done. The good news is we kept things like paid family medical leave in, child tax credit, universal meals, 2040, clean energy. We didn't have to compromise on any of the others. Tough vote, angry, had to compromise with Republicans because Democratic legislators would not vote for it because of that move. And that's part of the process. What I believe is, though, in Minnesota, people saw competency in government. They saw us compromising without compromising our values, and they see things that are improving the economy, improving their lives, and making a difference. It feels right now there's a hunger. While we did go into a special session for a couple weeks, pretty normal. 4 legislative leaders come out there, Democrats and Republicans, praise each other for working together with good intentions, passed a good budget, and now for me, I don't have to see them again until February next year, which is a good thing. So then we go on. But I will say this, I think it's important for Democrats. When we did get a 1-vote majority, it flips back and forth. When we did get a 1-vote majority in 2022, in the 23 session, we just basically passed the New Deal. We did everything. We even got rid of our racist flag and created a new flag. We just cleared the House, and I think that's something that's been missing when we're in there. It doesn't mean we're disrespecting the Republicans. It means we've been compromising on you and holding this state back because we compromised. We're not going to hold back anymore. We're going to pass all this stuff. Because trust me, Donald Trump has just showing you what happens when they get full control. They'll go as far as they can possibly go. I've been arguing we have to go as far as we can possibly go when we get the chance.
And let's just talk about some of the things you passed in 2022 and then also were able to hold this year. As people are thinking about cost of living,
yes,
there are a range of issues that you champion, child care, paid parental leave, other issues. Just give us a sense of that.
Yeah, the one I'm most proud of is child tax credit. Minnesota has always been a top 5 state for the lowest childhood poverty. But during COVID and the things the Biden-Harris administration did was they extended the child tax credit, which we saw the biggest drop in childhood poverty in history happen during those years because we put money back into people's pockets. In Minnesota, we passed the most expansive one in the country, $1,750, no limit on the number of children, and we passed it so that you can get it ahead of time. You don't have to file taxes at the end because many of these people don't. What we saw is about a 1/3 reduction in childhood poverty. We'll have the lowest rate. We coupled that with universal breakfast and lunches at school, which, by the way, after doing that and expanding early childhood education and scholarships, we just saw this year when we announced our graduation numbers, the highest graduation rates we've seen in state history. Isn't that amazing? If kids are stable, they have food. And we're now a top state for business. This is where Democrats need to. We take care of people, but it's okay to take care of people to help grow the economy. It's okay for people and businesses to be successful. Just pay your taxes, pay your fair share. And I'm proud of this. We keep hearing that. Well, Minnesota's a a high-tax state. You know what Minnesota does rank first in taxes? We are the most progressive and fairest state, which means if you make less than a certain amount of money, like $75,000, you will pay less taxes than you would in Florida because they just hide it. They tax you for clothes, they tax you for everything else. It's more expensive. So we do have a progressive tax rate, and what that's done is it's been able to grow the economy, and now we're a top 10 state for business development. We're fifth, I believe, in Fortune 500s per capita that are there because we've created a headquarters economy that people know. Guess why people move to places? Not because it's 40 below sometimes, which it is. They move there because they've got good schools, safe neighborhoods. They've got now 12 weeks paid family and medical leave. They've got earned safe and sick time. And we're a state that we set 2040 as carbon-free electricity generating, and everybody says you'll never make it. They're right. We're not going to make it. We're going to make it in 2035. So it moved up. Now all of a sudden, think about that. When we talk about clean energy, yeah, I said that the problem we have with issues like homelessness and clean energy, we set, and this is good, aspirational goals, but no one truly believes we're going to get there. Now all of a sudden, when we talk about we're going to have 100% carbon-free energy, electricity in Minnesota, now it's 10 years away where it seems reasonable to be able to do that. We did the same thing around homelessness. We're going to become, I believe, the fourth state or fifth state that will totally eliminate veterans homelessness. We're down to 211 veterans, I think. We know who they are, we track them. But there's a model there for all homelessness that the first and foremost is all 211 of those have a name and we know who they are. And veterans, the advantage with veterans homelessness is they come with services. They get health care, they have a stipend for housing potentially and all that. If you apply that then to others, you start to tackle that issue. And again, none of these things are radical. And it's really interesting to me that the business community is like, oh, we have a healthy, happy, well-educated population. That works better.
We're going to go to audience questions in a minute. I'm going to ask my last question before we go to the audience, just to reaffirm. If you have a question, and let's really focus on a question, it should be brief to get more people in, and you should identify yourself. So my last question will be, I don't think we can leave this discussion without just asking you broadly about what happened last night. Very eventful day on many scores, but the fact that we have Israel striking Iran and, in escalatory, I think would be an understatement. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, deeply concerned. I think we know anything in the Middle East. And look, I know there's a lot of folks here and across the country. The situation in Gaza is intolerable, and it became a central focus in the campaign, and I would say rightfully so. Human rights issues, how we're going to try and attempt to get a two-state solution where we can allow folks to live peacefully and coexist and have their own self-control or self-determination. The issue now in the spreading of this, and I have to be candid with you, I was there during the debates, and I voted for the Iran nuclear deal. I think it was one of the most and I said in there, just to be clear, with the Russian ambassador, with the French ambassador, with our negotiators, with everybody who was there to bring about the capacity to stop Iran's nuclear capacity, but in a way that was not so punitive that we would hamper some of their economic growth. I truly worry now. I'm sure there's great strategic thinkers in the Trump administration that have now said, how is this going to, a tweet from the president today said, I told them they should have done something, and now here we are. Yeah, here we are with the Middle East back on fire in a way that is now expanded. Iran has to retaliate in their mind, I'm sure. And now, who is the voice in the world that can negotiate some type of agreement in this? Who holds the moral authority? Who holds the ability to do that? Because we are not seen as a neutral actor. And we maybe never were. I don't want to tell anybody that. I think there's a lot of people that say you always leaned one way in this. But I think there was at least an attempt to be somewhat of the arbitrator in this. We saw President Carter do it with Begin and Sadat. We've had certain wins along the way that were actually mutually beneficial both ways. Now I ask, who that is. And I mean, consistently over and over again, we're going to have to face the reality, it might be the Chinese. And that goes against everything they say they're trying to do in terms of the balance of power. So I would just have to say my heart goes out for this. Ukraine continues to go on. Gaza continues to be a humanitarian disaster, and now it's expanded even further.
Well, I definitely rest easy knowing Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. So,
I shouldn't share this. He's a Minnesotan. We can't pick the middle. Prince, Pete Hegseth,
All right, questions. Anyone with questions? Over there. Again, if you'll identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Rachel DeWitt. I work for Ocean Conservancy, and just wanted to say thank you for always finding common ground and continuing to speak across the aisle. It's something that our organization does, but it's becoming increasingly difficult as we watch votes get taken that are taking funding away, undoing the IRA, that sort of thing. So my question is, how do we continue to find that common ground? How do we continue to have those conversations? Because I think the ability to make progress is broken down when that ceases to happen. So
it's a great question. And I considered, my time in Congress, I represented a very rural district, had one other Democrat since 1892, and I found myself being one of the 10 most bipartisan members of Congress. I had my values, but I was trying to make sure where we found common ground. I'm very proud in Minnesota that through the negotiations behind closed doors, there was a cordialness that I had not experienced for quite a few years. And yesterday, there was glimpses of it. There was, in the committee I was in, which is, I said, the one thing that came out of yesterday is I no longer fear going to hell. I have seen it. I've seen it. That's it. That's my personal hell, and I'm going to be there. But there were Republican members that we had worked together there and said, I have differences with the governor, but I will talk about those behind closed doors rather. And I was like, holy smokes. It was pretty, now the others didn't adhere to that. But I do think we have to model that. And I think it was really important. And I will say, very contentious issue. And we were there on immigration, by the way, trying to help. The very contentious issue on undocumented health care, which I, again, think it's a human right. I think it makes economic sense as well as moral sense to deliver it. But the Republicans weren't going to get it. And the Republican leadership understood that they weren't going to be able to get the votes. But I will say this, in Minnesota, at least several approached it with compassion. And I would argue that's why we still have children staying on it. And they conceded that new children could come on, which I thought was a big concession because their whole argument was this is a magnet for illegal immigration, why people are coming here. And they left in place that new children could come. Look, if you're crossing out of Guatemala to save your children, you're going to go where you can do the best. I don't necessarily think you're looking and deciding that, International Falls, Minnesota in the winter, because we do this. I do think there's an argument to be made that people probably do think about this. Places where I'm not going to be demonized and I'm going to be treated like a human being. So I don't totally dismiss this idea, but it's not about a magnet. It's about making yourself attractive for folks who want to. And our whole argument yesterday was, we fully agree with you that we need immigration enforcement. That's why we asked you to pass the bipartisan bill that did it humanely and created a path towards citizenship. Instead of going in and taking gardeners off the streets or raiding and setting at a school, we want you, because they continue to tell stories about someone who's undocumented creates a horrific crime. I don't think you'll find a single person in America who thinks that's okay. It's horrific. The problem is, federal government's job is to stop that, not the states. And by giving people things like health care or driver's licenses, I never understood the opposition to this. And I'm really proud that, like the Sheriff's Association said, oh my God, you got to get people licensed and trained if they're going to be on the road, because guess what? They will drive whether they have that license or not. And so I think finding the common ground, I think I'm not, pie in the sky. It was a brutal, debates we had, but they were done with more dignity and collegiality than I would have expected. And I think, to be candid, I think for Republicans, very difficult to be bipartisan right now, because They don't fear losing to a Democrat. They fear primaries. And I had legislators in Minnesota stand up and do the right thing, and they may get primaried for it, but it's the right thing.
Great. Over here? Right over here?
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for coming. My name is Annabelle. I'm a student at Duke University, and I was wondering, it feels like in the past decade or two, there's been this drift of rural working class voters kind of drifting away from the Democratic Party. So thinking about 2026 and the Democratic Party kind of becoming more of an elite, educated
Yes.
party, how do we kind of attract those people back?
Yeah, well, thank you. And your data would support your conclusion. And look, I've said this, school teacher, never planned on running. The district I won had one Democrat since 1892, very conservative district. In 2008, I won that district by over 30 points. In 2016, I won it by less than 2, but Donald Trump won it by like 18, I think. And there was just this shift and this drifting away. Republicans very clearly separated us, real America versus the big cities run by liberals. And then they tell people it's so dangerous there. So now you have folks who are born in cities are afraid to go to small towns. Small town people are afraid of the cities, and he successfully divided us. And I take this, especially in, we call it greater Minnesota, rural areas where I grew up. They paint me as elite. I grew up in a town of 500 people, 24 classmates, 12 cousins, went to state school, and I can't. They don't see me. They sided with the billionaires, which I think is history's going to write about this, how middle class and working class folks believe that the problem was other poorer folks or poorer than them that caused this, rather than a massive shift of wealth, unprecedented in human history, just simply asking for a fairness that would truly benefit folks. We have got to make it clear, like when I was growing up, you knew this. Democratic Party, oh yeah, they're the labor folks and the workers. Republican Party, they're the country club and the business owners. Not a total, certainly it's a little overgeneralization, but not too bad. Now when they asked a woman down in Georgia, how did you describe the Democratic Party? And she said, deer in the headlights. And she's probably not such a bad one. So I think for us, it's delivering on those middle class things, showing that we can competently and compassionately govern, getting results. And I do think there's a little bit of this, and I'm taking a little heat over it. I think the Republicans have capitalized and taken our kindness for weakness, and there has to be a little more standing up. That's why I think, and it's not like, their thing. I had this like 7-foot dude who he's like a retired professional wrestler, like challenged me to a fight. And I'm like, no, But what I mean being tougher is what we need to do is, like you saw Governors Pritzker and Hochul stand up and say, yes, we protect those less fortunate in New York and Illinois, and we're not going to let you bully them. We will stand there. That's what I mean. I think there needs to be a more robust Democratic Party, and I don't think always sternly worded letters get it done. And so that's why I'm convinced we got to everybody's got to do what they can do, but they've taken this weird, like almost physical strength thing with, UFC wrestling, all this kind of stuff. We have to have a robust strength of morals, values, sticking up to those less fortunate. That's why I think it's a mistake to focus just on economics and allow trans children to get bullied or something. I think they have to go in, or we look weak if we don't do it. So,
Great question. We're going to go to an online, because I do want to say we have tons of people online. I did want to specifically follow up on this question because I wanted to kind of delve into part of your answer in which you said, this is kind of a crazy con, right? That, where people have been convinced. And I guess one question I have for you is, if you step back and look at the policies of the first 5 months, when you combine the tariffs and the reconciliation package, just to nerd out here, if you look at the distribution, this is a set of policies that tax working class people in losing their health care, and working class people will bear the burden of the tariffs disproportionately. When costs go up, they pay for it. And the tax cuts are obviously very skewed to the wealthy. So I also think in this
And all the
moment-
services shrink.
Yes, and 16 million people will not have health insurance that would otherwise have it after this reconciliation package if it passes. So is that a new opportunity for us? How do we focus on that? How do we
Yeah, I
make
think
that
so.
case of who we're standing for and who they're standing for?
Yeah, you talked about the Great Con. On a local level, you see this especially in small towns. The budgets get really tight and they have to make some decisions. And I saw one that they had to decide, and the people who were elected to this said, we're going to make a tough decision. We're going to have to close the municipal swimming pool. You know who doesn't care about that? People who have a swimming pool in their backyard. And trying to make that connection. So I think we have a problem with this in that the tendency is to jump to, what's wrong with these people? They voted against their own self-interest. I approach it as a teacher a little bit. When I would teach a lesson and half the class wouldn't get it, I didn't just jump to the conclusion half the class wasn't very smart. I assumed that they don't learn the same way. Maybe they were auditory learners. Maybe they were kinesthetic learners. Maybe there was a different intelligence at work, and I might have to differentiate how I'm delivering that lesson. I'll make the argument that I think the Democrats look for a quick message or whatever to teach to one group and get it fixed. Our message has to be more diverse. You can't just say they voted against their own self-interest because they're telling us for some reason something in there motivated them to do that. But I don't think we can let it stand because that is a highly unpopular bill. Like in my state, I partnered with the largest hospitals. I partnered with advocacy groups. I partnered with AARP. I partnered with Children's Defense, all of these groups. And we went out there and just laid it out in a nonpartisan manner. And what came out of that was Republican legislators sent a letter to Republicans in Congress and said, don't vote for this, it'll hurt our communities.
Reconciliation bill.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. And now all of a sudden you have a change of dynamics where it's becoming much more personal. And now Democrats need to seize upon what would we do about that. And I think the immigration debate is a good one on this. I believe we lead with our hearts, we lead with compassion, but we let them own that issue. And it was fascinating yesterday that I think the three of us, the governors of New York, Illinois, and myself, making the case, we comply with federal law. If someone is arrested and convicted, and they're a convicted felon, before they are released, we call DHS. That doesn't make us horrible people. That has us following federal law. But what we don't do is, when someone has not had due process yet, we don't call ICE, we don't call DHS because they haven't gone through the process yet. And if we do call DHS and they don't come, we're not going to hold them forever waiting for you to come because they've gone through their due process. They've served whatever they needed to do in Minnesota. And so I think as Democrats, striking a balance between doing immigration according to the law and keeping our humanitarian values in place shows that we do care. Because the whole thing yesterday was telling these horrific, heartbreaking stories about crimes that were committed against people. All of us hate that. We need to seize that moment back, but then to highlight what Donald Trump so eloquently did today in saying, some of these people are good people and probably should stay here and work and we should make them citizens. It's really? We've been saying it, but here's my thing is, he's a master at this. That message is going to be well received. It's going to be well received in communities like mine that have a lot of protein processing plants, where we have a lot of first generation folks working at Hormel and JBS and Jennie-O. That's going to be well received all of a sudden that, you know what? He's going to create a path to citizenship. He won't do it though, by the way, just to be clear. He will not do it, but the message is out there.
I'm not losing sleep over Donald Trump creating a path to citizenship, but I hear you. Online, we have an online question.
There's a question from Jonathan online. If the president succeeds in cutting research funds as deeply as requested, can the U.S. innovation economy survive and recover?
No is the answer on that. And I say this, I'll be going to Boston on Monday where they have the biotech conference, many knows. My competition for biomedical, Medical Alley is between the Twin Cities, Mayo Clinic, Medtronic, 3M, Ecolab, and Boston, which Boston Scientific, by the way, is in Minnesota, just so you all know. But that innovation economy is everything to us. MedTech, we go and we do the trade missions. And we were in the Netherlands a while back and working with Philips, and now Philips creates a factory in Minnesota. And it's the all of you in this room, you know it. It's creating that, and it was the investments over time. At the core of all that is the University of Minnesota and the research dollars and the federal government. 3M, Minnesota Mining Materials came right out of the University of Minnesota, as many do. And so the attack on higher education, the attack on foreign students, the attack on the innovation, the attack on that, we're very proud. We're one of the highest patent areas in the country, and we do that. We're not going to do it with white Scandinavian people alone. We're old, and birth rates are lower. We do it by attracting immigrants to the community. We do it by attracting talent globally, and what they're doing, and then couple that with NIH grants going. A place like Mayo, I don't know the exact number, but it's hundreds that they have working on, the world's greatest medical institution. And while they have resources to do some of it, states and Mayo alone can't do it without the federal government. And so, yes, it's going to have catastrophic. I don't see any way if we close our doors. I just saw, somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, I just saw that the entire governing board of Fulbright resigned. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That'll work out well. So.
And then the targeting of the universities as well. Absolutely. Question here? And just identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Eli Goldstein. I'm a student at American University here in DC. Thank you for coming. My question is, currently there's a lot of debate about abundance versus populism. Do we start cursing? What do we do to all these focus groups on how to talk to people? How would you suggest talking to young people to get them back on the things? We saw a 40-point shift towards Trump. Harrison, you still won by a lot, but
Yeah.
how do we, and just versus the whole, how about you, what's your position on all these different strategies that are being focus grouped and all these other weird strategies that I don't think is going to work, but what is your position?
No,
and do
Well,
you
maybe
support,
focus
do you
grouping
support,
everything
do
is
you
the
support the
problem.
whole idea that politicians should start cursing, and how do we develop that with professionalism that politicians should have?
Well, it's a great question, and I didn't take it personally on the cursing and stuff. Yeah, that's the thing about, we all know that the catchword, and everybody's been talking about this for a long time, authenticity, being, authentic or whatever. I don't totally dismiss this idea. I think research matters. I think understanding where people are coming from, but I don't think you're going to find a quick answer in that. My son, who, by the way, graduated from high school this last week, so we're super happy. Happy with him. He told me, he said, Dad, a lot of, especially young men, he said, they're not really voting on the policies. They're voting because it's just kind of fun on the other side. And it's I'm not telling you that we should turn our politics into a circus, but the circus is working a little bit on the other side to a certain degree. We have to have a reason to pull people in. We have to have a reason. And I think the argument I've made is what Donald Trump was so successful is that he understands in a more impersonal society, a society that's disconnected more than connected by technology, he understood kind of that sense of being part of something. And I always, as a high school coach, I didn't care. I wanted him to play football, but I also did the plays. And we also wanted him to be in concert choir and speech and debate. Anything that kept somebody involved in their community. High schools are a microcosm of what our communities and society look like, and people want to be something. We lost a lot of people. I think a lot of young men in this disconnect or whatever are trying to find a home. Trump gets this. He provides them a uniform, red hat, stuff, flag or whatever, provides them some of the talking points they're on, provides them a mission, provides them a sense that they're being part of something. And that's why I come back to, how do they think that about the Democratic Party? Do they feel like there's a place for that? And so, my political consultant, Gus Walz, tells me, they're movable. History will show us this, though, and I think the data shows us this. They vote a certain way a couple times, it gets a little harder. But his point is right now, you guys have to be a little something. And look, I don't believe doing a Joe Rogan podcast would have won this election. I have said, I think you've got to fill every space, though. I think if you leave the void, they will fill it. And so I think my team booked me with Theo Vaughn this week, and so I'll go talk to him. I don't think you're going to win. It's like going out. Then it's weird if you go with them and you start pretending, hey, and you try and understand what Gen Z language is or whatever. You look stupid and pandering. But I think you go to them and understand, what are we offering you? And what I would say to the young people who are answering questions, somebody needs to tell you this. This is the worst time to be your age. It was so much more fun at a time before this. It was less stressful. We weren't super politically engaged in a way that we had to watch the news every day, because every day wasn't a damn crisis, and you didn't have to be there, and we didn't live through a pandemic, and we didn't get shot in schools. And so you're in this mode where it feels like everybody has a trauma score and everybody's on high anxiety. We as Democrats have to provide different things that make it easier and less stressful. And I think that's where you go back to these policies. We have North Star Promise. For all families who make $80,000 or less, they can go to any school in Minnesota tuition free. They go free. And I've heard families come up and say, my senior year was just so much better. I didn't have to pay for food at school. My family had a little more money. I know I can go to school next year. It's paid for. I don't have to get a student loan. It's interesting how all of a sudden now that was so personal and it was so fast. It wasn't generations before. I guarantee you in Minnesota, young people are going to vote DFL because they know who passed these things. And I would argue to you, we've got to do that. It's going to be different elsewhere. I just worry, though, it would be totally understandable if young people became cynical and checked out, because this is a hellscape of politics right now. But what I think, and this goes back to my optimism in this, they're not turning away. They're super engaged. They are connected enough that they want this crisis lifestyle to end. That's what I find so interesting. How do you think these people in the Trump orbit live their regular lives? Is every day like crisis? People want some stability. They want some predictability. They want to know. Some of you in here know that my happy place is remembering where you wouldn't even hear about the president for like 3 weeks in a row. Oh, what's he doing now? I thought that might have been my strongest closing argument during the campaign. If you elect us, you won't have to see everybody on TV every damn day, and stuff will be done by professionals who are there because of their expertise, not because they can yell at somebody else. So I still think there's an option. I think we need to listen to folks. I think we need to give them a vision of a better future, because I'm really worried. Imagine someone who was born, this group that's 25 or so that watched their parents go through the Great Recession, watched the first Trump presidency, watched COVID, witnessed, the murder of George Floyd and, the rise of us trying to come to grips with inequities, and then the rise again of this, and then you're watching LA, you're watching Senator Padilla, that's a lot. And I think the rest of us need to figure out a way to give them a better path forward. You can only watch so many apocalyptic movies, and then you want to watch a dog coming home movie and a happy one. I want us to be the dog coming home movie.
Way back over there? Yeah. You're going in the totally wrong direction.
Hi, Governor Walz. Thank you for being here. My name is Logan McDonald. I work at CAP. And you kind of touched on it earlier. You have continued to be a thought leader in this discussion post-election and everything. And as someone who works in this space, has worked on elections and identifies as queer, really seeing the targeting of the trans community by leaders in our space is so disheartening.
Yeah.
They are turning our back on us and the people who uplift them. So what is your message to us and the party who identify somewhere in the community or our allies? And then what is your message to those leaders who are turning their backs on us?
Yeah, and I've said it and got in trouble for it, that I said, shame on any of us who turn our backs on folks. I think we have to name it and recognize this might be the most dangerous time, especially for the trans community. Dangerous in terms of just the mental health challenges that are on that. We know that the suicide rates are much higher, but violence amongst. And then those who will say you focus too much on this. And look, that ad that Donald Trump did was despicable, but I myself think, because the target group he was going for, every football game I watched on Sunday afternoon, if I could catch one, was on there. Donald Trump's for you, they for their, them. And I always approach this, the basic humanity of it, but I still think the best message on this is the queer and trans community just want to live their lives and be left alone. And it goes back to me not being flippant and saying, how difficult is it just to mind your business? They'll mind theirs. And that's where we're not in the space where they say, don't make it a top priority. And I'm like saying, well, somebody's life's a top priority. It matters to them. They see where we're at. I think it's ratcheting it back down where we were getting to that point, and the Republicans figured out that it was a good attack. They brought it back. They first, they moved through everything, the LGB, they moved through that community. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, well, you've seen this with Republican legislators. Well, my niece is a lesbian, so I'm okay with it now. It takes a bit coming into the family. Well, it became more, people saw it. I think they saw the trans community because of the smaller number as an opportunity to attack. So I think for us is to first recognize it's a dangerous time. I think it's beholden to states that can to create all the safety net they can, both legally, policy-wise, help, everything else. And I think it's important for leaders because it has a real effect in their communities to stand up and say something, because I hear that from folks saying, look, all I need to do is hear that. But they're not going to stop at it because it still works for them. And they believe it. And I don't know, I haven't seen the numbers. I just anecdotally on that ad, I think it was pretty devastating. And I think it might be more devastating when you're silent about it. Silence feels like complicity to me. And I think complicity, we lose the issue and we look weak. So continue to speak up, know the community's there, know that people see you, hear you, love you, but a recognition of we understand the stress you're under.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question right here.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Ms. Tendon. Sanjeev Berry, public interest advocate. It seems that Trump and the Republicans are really good at punching down. We've been talking about that, blaming people without power for perceived challenges in America. What would it mean for Democrats to be really good at punching up?
Yeah, I'm testing that out. I'm testing it out. I got to be honest with you, of all the weird things that happened to me was not on my bingo card that I would be in a full-blown feud with the richest man in the world. And I'm telling you, I'm going to take a little bit of credit for this. That guy's kind of out of sight now a little bit. When he was involved in that Wisconsin Supreme Court race, I was over there just beating him, doing everything I could, pushing back, saying this, using profanity towards him. Yes, I did. But doing what I said, and I got a bunch of heat yesterday because I'm inciting violence, because I said we should bully the crap out of Donald Trump, because as a teacher, you talk to children about bullies, you tell them why it's wrong or whatever. When it's an adult and someone like Donald Trump, the only thing he knows is the same stuff coming back. And I watched them kind of wilt. It wasn't just like luck or, trying to just be flippant. I thought instead of making him a scary authoritarian wannabe who is incredibly dangerous, which I believe he is, I just thought, what a weird dude doing some of this stuff. And then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, that's just strange. And that started to move, and I knew that was working. He gave an interview one time, like a 20-minute interview. 11 times he told the interviewer why he wasn't weird. And I'm like, yes, they're going into that. So I think this one of punching back, making it, look, the guy is a billionaire, surrounding himself by billionaires, and he went to Les Mis. I'm like, come on, America, come on. You kind of feel this, that I think pointing at it, and again, I think there's a fine line here that I think Democrats are in a bit of a bind, that we're seen as the anti-success party, that it's somehow not okay to create some personal or generational wealth for your family. We can't be that. We just have to be the party that says we're for that, but you greedy guys need to pay your fair share and start pushing back. And because they always say, oh, you're creating class warfare. No, you're winning the war. You are winning the class war because you have somehow got us fighting each other while you take all the profits and stand on the edge. So we're going to have to be better at it. We have to single them out. We have to know why they have these things. And let's be honest. I think Musk is the example that it worked. It started to hurt him personally. Look, of course I want, I mentioned about Tesla. Go back and work Tesla. Go back and do that. Don't come and cut my mom's Social Security. Don't make a child in Africa not be able to get HIV treatments if they need it. Don't do that. but I'm all for you doing this. The idea is you don't get to do both. You don't get to gain wealth, game the system, and hurt people. And I think that was a successful one where it started to hurt financially. It started to make an impact. He started to get the blowback and driving the wedge. So I think at the end of the day, again, people smarter than me know this. This transfer of wealth is really at the key to most of these problems that has gone on there. I think Senator Sanders has been highlighting that, but we have to bring it down to a level that makes more sense to people. They feel it more, and it doesn't feel like we're against success in general. We're just against greedy gaming the system people. So
Excellent. That's a great way to end. Really great conversation.
good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Governor Walz, and thank you. Let's give him another round for standing up in this moment.
Thank you all. You're the best.
You're the best.
Thanks, folks.